And I think the point about that there's larger existential reasons to cut, that just rings a bell for me about the housing situation that you brought up. And maybe we can get into some of the trust that you have there, but 100%, like the real estate market is just hanging by a thread right now. Like inventories are just building up like crazy. Nobody wants to sell, or sorry, nobody wants to buy. Everybody is starting to want to sell. And as we churn through it, and we've talked about this too, about how in other countries outside of the US, the situation is even worse because no matter what, your mortgage is going to be reset after 5 years. It's not like the US where you can sit on it. So yeah, it feels like the chickens are coming to roost in that respect. So
I think we're hitting this point generationally where boomers have been sitting on a lot of equity in their homes for years and years. And we're starting to see prices roll over and inventory kind of rise. And there's a really interesting case to be made that we could see some sort of like little housing wipeout here if there's a large gap between buyers and sellers. It's so clear.
These are great charts, and Neil Dutta was on the show a few weeks ago, and yeah, I think it just shows the mismatch of it. And it's so interesting because to me, everybody expects markets to be hyper liquid and efficient, where it just, we can see what's coming, but the fact is it takes a long time for it to work through such an illiquid asset class like real estate. So you have to go through the sequences of higher rates, and then a buyer's and a buyer's strike, and then that freezes the market, and then you have to see supply to come online as people start to get squeezed by refinancing or just mortgage rates in general, and then you need to see the inventory blow up, and then you need to get the psychological effect of people starting to get a bit panicky because their house that they need to sell is sitting on the market for 4 months. And then you need to have that capitulatory move of, oh shit, I got to get out of this thing, and I'm willing to take a 10% haircut. And then once everybody starts to feel that same way, that's when you start to see that washout, I think, that you're talking about.
Yeah. And it feels like we're on the cusp of that, which is, what is it? 30% of the economy is tied to housing one way or another. And if this is the backdrop right now, geez, I think we're politically in for an easing cycle just off the back of this eventually. Like that should give them enough political capital to ease. This is a good thing I saw on Twitter too. It says, I put it in chart 41. If you had to pick a year when baby boomers are most likely to finally start leaving their homes in big numbers, adding meaningful supply to the market, what year would you pick? This is to ChatGPT. And it says 2031. And that's when the oldest baby boomers turn 85. It says US data shows the odds of leaving owner-occupied housing for assisted living nursing homes jump fivefold once people hit 85, which is like, maybe we front run that because the housing costs, the interest rates are so high. Now, if they bring interest rates down, maybe 2031 actually happens. But like, I think you could see a real cascade here if they don't ease financial conditions on that 30-year yield.
This is such an interesting point because I feel like people haven't gone to the second order effects of this yet, because we all hear in this world right now that all the boomers own the real estate and our generation can't buy anything, but the fact is that eventually life is limited, and eventually that all that real estate needs to go somewhere, whether it gets inherited by the next generation or some of them need to start selling. And yeah, it just sort of, it's an interesting tie-in to what we talk a lot about in terms of cycles and fourth turnings and that sort of thing. And right now all the assets are in the boomer class, and then that big next wave, like we're all so stuck in our recency bias of where we're at right now, which is that the housing market sucks and it's extremely unaffordable. But on the other side of things, you have this dynamic coming. You have what is looking like the residual of a huge surge of condo creation for the Airbnb Ponzi that's been the last 5 years. Like you have, I see it so much here in Canada, where you have all these people that thought they could get rich off owning shoe boxes of like 500 square feet little condos that they could just rent out on Airbnb forever, and that would be their retirement plan. And suddenly they're being left holding the bag right now, where there's just way too many of these shoe boxes. There's no detached homes. It feels like the tide is turning in housing, and this is a really interesting catalyst here.